Good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to see you all, even if I can't see you all properly, but thank you for joining me this afternoon. I'm delighted to be asked to take part in your series of webinars that you're having at the moment. A little bit of background on me before I start. So as Debbie said, I am a specialist loss and change coach. My official title has the words grief recovery in it, which scares some people, but you know, what we're all experiencing right now is a process of grief, and I'm going to kind of get into that a bit more this afternoon. So a little bit about why I'm sitting in front of you. I have been involved in education in just over 30 years. I'm going to stop counting soon, I think. It's definitely adding up. Started off many years ago in a primary school as a nursery nurse, as we used to call them, then went on to primary teaching. I then went into lecturing. First of all, I started at the local college and then went to university, where I was a program leader for a teaching and learning program, which was a route into primary teaching. But at that time, I also taught and helped write degrees for youth workers, early years workers, health and social care workers. So kind of quite a broad spectrum in our school. And I worked there until a few years ago, when this work that I do now really started to take over and I had to make a choice. So I jumped towards this work and I have never regretted it for 1 minute. I spent many years, as I've just said to you, teaching those who want to be youth workers, early years workers, working with children and families. And in all the years that I taught on all the degree programs and the lower level courses from level 1, 2 and 3 all the way up to postgrad, I always felt that the element of helping those who were struggling was missing in that mandatory training. So I spent time looking for something that was something that I could use and couldn't really find anything. In 2012, I got married, went off on my honeymoon. In the 2-week period that I was away at sea without phone, internet or any connection with the outside world at all, which was wonderful, one of my closest friends died very suddenly, leaving behind 2 young boys and a husband. My niece's partner was killed in a road traffic accident, leaving behind 2 very small children. And a young man that I'd taught in reception many years previously took his own life at the age of 22. And that was in a 2-week period. And as I came back full of the joys of honeymoon and feeling all excited, everybody around me was really, really struggling. I subsequently struggled because certainly for my friend, I'd already missed her funeral. That had all taken place. I felt that everybody else had got on with life and dealt with it, and that I should put on a brave face and get on with it, because if I didn't, I would be upsetting everybody by wanting to talk about what happened potentially 3 weeks previously instead of letting them all get on with life. So that's what I did. I did the typical British stiff upper lip thing, buried my head in the sand and got on with life. But for a number of months, I couldn't get it out of my head that there was nobody really to help these families and support them. My friend's family was supported through the local hospice. The children both declined that support because they didn't want it. 12 months later, when they did, unfortunately, they were declined because they had missed their opportunity and had to go back on a waiting list. And it really started to raise my awareness of what's out there. Sometime later, I was very fortunate to be at an education conference in Birmingham, and I walked past the stand and it said, "Do you want to help children and young people deal with loss and change in their life?" And to cut a very long story short, I spoke to the lady. I tried to talk her into coming and doing some training, and she ended up talking me into training to be a specialist. And that's why I'm here today. So my role primarily is working with either adults themselves who are struggling in a group or individually. I work a lot with large organisations, banks and other organisations similar, who put support in place for their staff. And I also work in this situation where I support those who give their time, and their job is, or they are a parent of a child or a young person who needs support. Very often the people that come to me come after there's been a problem, not before. But I think what I want to stress to you right now is that the work that I do is far easier if you're prepared and have the tools before something happens, rather than waiting till after. So if you happen to be talking to somebody about this work and they say, oh, you know, we're not there yet, we're going to need help next year, tell them to get the help now, because actually it makes so much difference. So I'll give you an example. If you'd all had this training 6 months ago, well before COVID, well before the lockdown, I think you would have felt differently about the roles that you have and the job that you do. So I'm all about helping people to be proactive and be ready. So don't be thinking that this is only useful when something's happened or after it's happened. The other thing as well that I want to make clear is, I know that the title for this webinar this afternoon was Bereavement and COVID, but I'm a loss specialist, and in my eyes, bereavement is only one element of the losses that are being experienced right now. There are over 40 significant losses that we will experience in a lifetime. We won't all experience them all, but the list is massive, and that's just the significant ones. Forget all the smaller ones. So that's really what I want to talk to you about this afternoon, about the fact that we are going to look at bereavement, but the skill set that I give to people and the tools that I use are used for loss. Loss could be defined as a change or end in a familiar pattern of behaviour. So anything that we do or say every single day or every single week or once a month, whatever we do, when that thing stops happening, whether it's a place we go to, a person we see, a car that we drive, when that changes or ends, that causes loss. Loss then can cause grief. And therefore, we are dealing with grief on a scale that we have never had to deal with before. The losses at the moment are absolutely massive. Usually when I'm working with people, I would say to them, so, you know, if this issue that you're dealing with right now with this young person or in your centre or in your organisation, if you need support, then turn to somebody you know who isn't directly involved, who can support you. But right now, we're all in the same situation. We don't want to put our worries and troubles on others because we're worried that everybody's dealing with this. So on that note, my advice to you is, if that's how you are feeling, or you know that is how somebody is feeling, then please connect them with me, because I am happy to support anybody who just needs to talk. One of the things that I'm going to discuss at the end of this webinar is the training that I know you are being offered through this organisation. So this training has been running for a number of years. I want to say possibly 30, probably 40 years in the States and around the world. This training is international. It's delivered all over the world. No matter where you do the training, you get exactly the same. It's been in the UK since about 2012, 2013. And it's massively useful. We deliver it in schools, in organisations, and of course we deliver online, and at the moment that's perfect because this is absolutely what we need. So let's kind of start to think about what these young people have lost. So our first thought is potentially a person, somebody close to them, maybe somebody in their family, maybe a neighbour, a friend, through death or through illness. So it may be somebody who's still ill, and therefore isn't the person they were anymore, and they can't have the same relationship, because this is about relationships as well. A relationship, we have relationships not just with people, but with places, as I say, with our car. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but how many of you remember your first car, those who drive, and how remember either, oh, I don't know, let's be broad here, selling it, destroying it, writing it off, it getting to a point where it dies and it won't run again, and you have to say goodbye to that car, and you might think, yeah, I remember. Chances are it wasn't last year, but it's still very clear in your head, because it's a pivotal time of your life, and this is what we're talking about. So these young people have lost, off the top of my head, they've possibly lost people, they've lost routine. Some of them have a loss of safety and a loss of trust, depending on the home life or the situations that they live in. And you potentially are the people that provide that usually, and are now not there for them. Loss of lifestyle, loss of finance, again, depending on how a family works. There's so many people are out of work. That will have impacted so many young people. Even if the family had a good income before they started, chances are both parents are now out of work. So I could sit here for the next 45 minutes easily and list all the things that we're talking about. So think about it a little more globally, a little more holistically, rather than bereavement, death, and kind of just not being at school. Just not being at school, loss of routine, loss of friendships, loss of some kind of framework to the life, loss of food for some young people, and good nutrition, depending on the area you're in, if they're not getting free meals or food parcels. So just at school, the loss of just the journey to school, the people they walk to school with, the people they communicate with, not in lessons, the friendships that they have on the way to school but not in school, and all the other clubs of activities that they access through that school life has all stopped. So we're just in school, we're talking about a massive amount of loss and change, and that's what I'm all about. So primarily the work that I do is about communication. It's about teaching people the communication skills to deal with these kind of situations. And the idea is with this program that I teach people the skills and the language to use, not just for that young person today, but for that young person to learn the skill set themselves, so that when they next deal with something, they have the skill set to try and deal with it themselves. So it's about forward life skills. It's about giving them a toolkit that they can use for the rest of their life. A lot of the trouble that young people have with the situation we're in and other situations that are similar is to do with communication. I'm not going to ask you to kind of raise your hand, but I'm just going to ask you, I would imagine that a large number of you on this webinar are first aid trained. Yeah. So this is a question for those who aren't first aid trained, or for you if you are, think back to before you did your training. So I want you to imagine that you are in a physical room with me now. We're in a training room, we're all together, maybe we're at a conference, and somebody walks across the front and falls, and when you go to them, you can clearly see that they have a really bad break in their leg, really bad. Are you going to go and pick them up, or are you going to get some help? So these are for the non-first aiders. Deborah, can I pick on you? You can unmute yourself because you know where the button is. Quick, come on. So if you aren't first aid trained, do you move them?
If I wasn't first aid trained, yes, of course I would. I'd want to pick them up and make sure that they're okay.
Would you if you could see they'd broken the leg?
I'd be worried
What's
about
our
them.
instinct? Jackie, please unmute yourself. I can see you waving at me.
Probably my instinct would be to actually faint or something like that, but in practical terms, I just wouldn't move them.
You wouldn't touch them? No?
No.
So do we agree that we would leave them because we don't know what we're doing? We're not specialists, we're not doctors, and if we're first aid trained, then we know we definitely shouldn't move them. So thank you for that input.
I would just drag them away.
Cuddling
I was
them.
trained.
So we've decided we need to leave them on the floor. So why is it when somebody is struggling with an emotional issue that we feel it necessary to rush in and give them lots of advice and guidance, even if we don't actually know whether we're saying or doing the right thing? Now, I don't want you to think that I am judging any of you when I say this, because I can say to you, hand on heart, before I did this training, that was me. Because I didn't think that I was saying the wrong thing. But what I learned was, through my years of experience in doing this work, is that actually, just as the person with the broken leg, I can do more damage by saying the wrong thing than by not saying anything at all. And that might seem really hard, as Debbie just said, oh yeah, I want to pick them up. And that's exactly the same with somebody who is struggling emotionally. We just want to, even if it's not physically, we just mentally want to scoop them up and make it better and make it right. So what I do is I'm all about teaching people what to say, and more importantly, what not to say, so that we know that when we're saying this stuff, we're actually saying things that are helpful and not making it hurt more. For those of you who have ever been through a difficult time in your life, you will possibly remember things that people said to you at that time that in certain situations you just kept your mouth shut and you smiled and said, I'm fine. But in your head and your heart, you were screaming, you're really not helping me. You're really not saying things that are helping. So, for example, one of our go-to sayings is, don't cry, don't be sad. Well, for a start, sadness and crying are the two most normal and natural reactions to a time of difficulty. Now, a lot of young people and a lot of adults do not like to show emotion in public, and I get that. But that's different than actually saying to somebody that they shouldn't show emotion. It might be done behind closed doors or in privacy or with somebody they trust. But the problem is that the more we say that, the more that we embed it. And we're not saying it to be hard or horrible. We're saying it because we think we're helping. But that as a phrase in itself can be desperately hard when somebody has come maybe to you or somebody else and they just want to get rid of that. They need to unload. And it's so difficult. Saying everything's going to be okay. I never say that because I don't actually know. And at the moment, none of us know. So I could say, you know, somebody could say to me, well, my mum's really poorly in hospital, and I could say, everything's going to be okay. That's not true. It's absolutely not true, because I don't know that everything's going to be okay for that person, adult or child. And all the things that I'm saying this afternoon, I would say the same thing to an adult that I would to a young person, that I would to a child, because it's not any different. None of this is ever different. It doesn't matter how old you are. Somebody telling you that you need to stop being sad and that everything is going to be okay is unhelpful. But we say it because we have listened to our parents and our grandparents and our aunts and our uncles, and everybody says it, so we just say it. And until I did this work, I thought that was the best thing to say as well. So it can be very, very difficult. And this is about using common sense, if you like, in a way, and what I call emotional honesty. If you don't know it's going to be okay, then just don't say it's going to be okay. There are lots of other things you can say. I can't cover everything in a 45-minute session in an afternoon, but it's about, you know, for those of you who were ever told this as a child, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. I do remember that being said to me on many occasions as a young child, and it's kind of a bit like that, where if you don't know what to say to somebody in a difficult situation, don't say anything specific. So I'll give you an example. Acknowledge their feelings, and don't say, I know how you feel. How many of you have been in that position where you've been having an awful time, something's happened to you, and everybody says to you, oh, I know how you feel. I know exactly how you feel. And at this time, because we're all experiencing this situation, lots of people are saying that. But everybody's situation is different. Everybody's living a different life. Everybody's experiencing this differently. I would imagine for most of you, you've been working through this period and you haven't just been sat at home. I do this work, and I also support students who are at university, and the minute we went into lockdown, we were already working online, and we went from 7-hour days to 11-hour days because our students lent in, not out, which is fabulous. But if I hear of any more people who've painted their fence and redecorated their whole house and are now a master baker and you know, they're brown as a berry, and I'm like, oh, please don't tell me that. I'm in daylight from, I can't even tell you how many weeks of lockdown we're in. I have no idea. And I also know that my work in this side has increased massively. And most of the calls I'm getting are from young people and adults who are saying, I'm not coping very well. I think I might have a problem. I'm not sure whether I should go and see my doctor. I'm scared about going back to school. I'm scared about going to see my friends again. I'm scared of going outside. I don't think I want to go back to school because everything I see on the news is scary. And my back to them is always, what you are experiencing is normal and natural. And everybody experiences times like this. And unfortunately, we're all experiencing it together. Also with young people, and it's the same for adults and children as well, when we are dealing with something that affects us emotionally, it also affects us physically. Lots of people get headaches, stomach aches, chest pains. You know, I could go on. People end up developing heart conditions and IBS because instead of dealing with or getting rid of these emotions, they're trying to hold them all in, and that potentially makes them feel physically unwell. So again, we've got young people who are thinking there's something wrong with them because they feel sick. They've got stomachache, they don't want to go outside. But this is all linked with the emotional intensity of the time that we're living in. And it does make such a big difference, and you can allay somebody's fears massively just by saying, there's nothing wrong with you. What you're experiencing, what you're feeling is normal and natural. And if you feel upset and you need to cry, then you have a cry. And if you feel angry, then feel angry. And if you feel sad, then feel sad. The problem after that, it comes with, what do we do with that? And that's part of the process of the training that I deliver. But in short form, it's about giving them the chance to talk if they want to. Now, not everybody, but some people, we talked before about not, emotion and not showing emotion. So I worked as a primary teacher and a lecturer for a total of 30 years, I said. And in that time, in that work, I was expected to put a mask on every morning when I went to work. So when I remember many years ago, one of my family members saying something to me, because I spoke at that time I was teaching in reception, and I think my dad had baked something, and I said, oh, Dad, what a lovely cake. And he said, you're not still in reception now. You're talking to an adult. But we have that persona. We leave our troubles at the door. We don't bring our personal lives into our work because that's not what we do, because we're professionals. However, in this work, you have to show a glimmer of yourself. And you can do that through being emotionally honest. Being emotionally honest doesn't mean sharing your life story with the young person or the adult that you're talking to. It doesn't mean offloading. What it means is, when a young person says to you, I'm really struggling and I feel sick and I can't go out the door, and I don't, and I think I've got a mental health condition or something because I think I'm going mad because I can't cope, is for you to give them an example of a time when you couldn't cope, when you felt scared, when you felt emotionally overwhelmed, and to share that with them. You don't even have to share any detail. You can say something like, oh, I remember when maybe somebody's relative is poorly. I remember when my uncle was poorly, and I just remember having a headache all the time and feeling sick, and that's quite normal and natural to feel this way. There's nothing wrong with that. You're not mentally ill. That term is used far too frequently. We talk about mental health and people being mentally ill. This is grief. This is loss. This is natural and normal, and we all experience it, usually at different times. But in this pandemic, we're all dealing with it at the same time. And this is the other thing to remember. We're all dealing with this as well. So as a note to you, if you want to connect with me privately and send me an email, I know that Deborah's going to make sure that my email is in the chat. Send me an email if I can help you in any way at all, even if you just want to offload for 10 minutes. You can do that in confidence. Please connect with me. But this is about making sure that they understand that what they're experiencing is normal and natural, and that's what happens when things are difficult. We are taught all through our lives how to get things. You need to get a job. You need to get a boyfriend. You need to get a girlfriend. You need to get a degree. You need to get a nice house. You need to get a car. You need to get a dog. You need to have children. Get. Nowhere in any part of that does anybody teach us what to do when we lose one or all of those things. And never really does it happen all in one go. So at the moment you are dealing with young people who you will not speak to one young person who's lost one thing, because even within that one thing, like I say, just not going to school, it's a ripple. So if you think about a situation where maybe a child's parents are divorcing, and this is another thing which has actually grown significantly during lockdown, divorce and separation has increased massively. So let's think about it. I'm going to be non-stereotypical, and I shall say that mum has left dad at home with 2 children. Mum has gone, dad's there. What has that child left? That young person has lost mum. No, they haven't lost mum. They've potentially lost all of mum's family. They've lost the grandparents' Pillsbury that they went to tea with every Saturday afternoon. They've lost that house, those people, the things that they had in that house that were theirs, the possessions, the other people that they saw when they visited that house. If they're a younger child, you know, the part they played in, the other children that they saw and met, the young people that they met when they were at that house. That's massive. That's not just one person. So there will not be anybody that you are speaking to or supporting that has lost one thing. So it's about making sure that they understand that everything that is happening to them is quite normal and quite natural. And this is it. Without sounding horrible, this is what life's about. But the problem at the moment is that usually you might be connecting with me because you've got 1 or 2 young people that need your help. You're now doing this because everybody potentially will need this help. And this is not just the children, this and young people, this is their parents, this is your friends, this is your relatives, these are people in your communities that need your support. But as far as I'm concerned, the toolkit is exactly the same. It's about language, it's about making people feel that what they're experiencing is normal, and also that by not perpetuating those really unhelpful statements. So I'll give you an example. Let's lift the mood a little. Let's not talk about COVID and Corona. Let's imagine that you are back to being however old you were when you finished your first relationship, boyfriend or girlfriend, and you went home and you told your parents, and I remember sobbing my heart out and feeling like my life had ended and I was never going to fall in love again, and my world was ended. And I'll give you a little bit of a backstory. My first true love, I'm not going to name him because that would be unfair, but I thought he was the bee's knees. He was about 4 years older than me and he drove a yellow Beetle, and I thought he was amazing. And my dad was in the Navy at the time, and we were going out to Florida for 3 weeks to visit him. And I said to my best friend, keep your eye on him, will you, and look after him? And she did. We'll say no more. So I remember telling my mum and dad when we came back how devastated I was. And my mum and dad came, and my mum and dad were great parents, I have to say. So this is not about them not saying or doing. All the stuff that they came out with. Well, we never really liked him. Well, there's plenty more fish in the sea. Well, I'm sure you can do better than him. Well, you know, he did drive rather fast. Well, you know, there's lots of other. What about a boy your own age? Do you not want somebody around? So all these things were perpetuated. And I just went, yeah, you're right. But I was still crying inside, because what I really wanted them to do was put their arms around me and say, do you know what? If you need to cry, cry. And if you need to be sad, because that's what happens when you feel like your heart's broken and it's never going to mend and life will never be the same again. Now, I have to tell you, however many years later, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but let me tell you, I'm not still crying over Boy in the Yellow Beetle. And my life is great. But at the time, I know now that it really, what I needed was the right words, not those words that just said basically, go away, stop crying, it's not as bad as you think it is. And my dad probably said something like, why don't you peel some potatoes instead of standing there crying, you know, do something useful. Stop the tears. Just on a very, because the work I do is very much from the heart. It's about emotion. So I don't talk about intellect. And people say to me, oh, is this so? For those of you who've studied at all, you'll know Maslow and you'll know all these different theories and NLP and all that stuff. None of the work that I do particularly links to anything in particular. Attachment theory and all that. But what I do know, because it was proven in research, I think it was last year, tears of joy and tears of sadness contain two different chemicals. Tears of sadness actually contain a chemical that helps us to process a problem. So by stopping somebody from having a cry, if that's what they need to do, we're actually saying shut down those natural painkillers, shut down those things that your body needs to help you deal with this problem. So it's been proven that it helps to cry. People have been known to die of a broken heart. Again, it's been proven. Now, we're not getting to that point. What I'm saying is that it is important that this is about emotion. The stuff that you are dealing with or are going to be dealing with on an enormous scale is emotional. And allaying those fears and making sure that the young people in your community and their parents and their extended families have a way of processing this. And so it is about what you say and the way you say it. And if you can't say anything nice, as we said before, if you don't know what to say, if you're on the spot and you have no idea, then say that. So if nothing else, remember the phrase, and you'll have used it, but not necessarily thought about it in this way, where somebody just says, I have no words. I don't know what to say to you. I have no words. All I can say to you is, I'm here if you need me. I'm here if you need to talk. The essence of saying to somebody, I don't know what to say, you would probably think, well, that wasn't very helpful. But actually, for most people who are struggling, young or old, they don't want you to find solutions. They don't want you to give them answers at that moment. They just want you to listen. They just want to offload. As I say, this process continues, and I can, if you choose to, give you the tools to take them further and to take them through this process with an action plan to bring them out the other end. But this is just today about communication and helping people of whatever age to deal with this situation. The other thing I kind of touched on a minute ago was about saying, I know how you feel. We don't. My dad died, I was going to say just before last Christmas, but actually we've had another year since then. So it will be 2 years in November since my dad died. And I was very, very close to my dad. And I used the tools that I have to prepare for losing him, because we got to the point where we could see it was going to happen. And I did prepare. It didn't change the fact that I broke my heart and, didn't move far from the sofa for about 5 days afterwards, because that's what I was experiencing, and it's about dealing with it however you need to deal with it. But the number of people who gave me all that unhelpful information after my dad died, such as, he's in a better place. Well, he's not, because as far as I'm concerned, he should be around at my house on a Friday night like he was every week, having something to eat and enjoying some family time. So the statement, he's in a better place, washes nowhere with me. And actually, when you're in that grief situation, it can actually make you quite cross and a bit more angry by somebody telling you how you should feel and what you should think. Let's think of some of the others. Well, he'd had a good life. That was another one. Well, we hadn't finished with him yet. He was only 73, and yes, he had a flipping good life and he'd done some amazing things, but we still had things to do. And from the anger and upset perspective, if we're talking about bereavement, it's not just about that person going, it's about what you hadn't finished with that person yet. what I would describe as unmet hopes, dreams and expectations. Things that we want to do, things that we wanted to do with that person that we're never going to get the chance to do. So for a young person, it might be that if it was a parent, that person's never going to be at their wedding, be there when they have their first child, be there when they go to university, all those things. So it's not just about what we've already done, although that's massive. There's always the woulda, shoulda, couldas. What we personally think, oh, I wish I'd done this, I wish I'd done that, I should have said this, I shouldn't have said that. I wish I'd done this, I wish I hadn't done that. All that stuff's there. But it's all communication. It's all stuff that we need to say, that we need to get out. Unhelpful things again. He wouldn't have wanted you to be sad. Well, my dad, yeah, probably right. He would not have wanted me to be sad. However, he understood that when sad things happen, you get upset. And what you need is, he knew for me, it was a hug and a cry I needed. And then, we'd sort it out. But somebody keeps saying to me, he wouldn't want you to be sad. He wouldn't want you to be unhappy. Sadness is one of the things that we feel when we lose somebody we love. And the fact that people just keep saying to you, that's not how you should feel, that's when you start to question, well, is there something wrong with me? Am I not doing it right? The number of people who've asked me over the years, maybe I didn't grieve properly, maybe I didn't grieve right, maybe I didn't grieve properly, maybe I didn't, when I lost him, maybe I didn't do it properly. And that comes from the language that other people use when we're struggling, which makes us question ourselves. So as I say, remember, if nothing else, I don't have any words. I don't know what to say to make you feel better. And the never say, my top of my list is, I know how you feel. Because my dad died, my friend's dad died just before my dad. One of my best friends lost her dad 2 weeks before my dad died. I wouldn't say to her, I know how you feel. Because her dad and my dad, I had a relationship with my dad, she had a relationship with her dad. They were very different. We're very different people. We've led very different lives. And then, of course, you've got the situation where somebody's maybe been bereaved and actually they didn't really like the person that's died, or they didn't really know them very well. So I'll give you a brief example here. A young person who, let's say grandma. Grandma is a person who visits twice a year, birthday and Christmas. She's the lady that turns up, that smells of roses and brings chocolates and a present, and she comes in birthday and she comes at Christmas, but apart from that, they really don't see her. So when grandma dies, there possibly isn't going to be a big emotional outpouring. There possibly isn't going to be much of a reaction because the relationship wasn't there with that person. They didn't know them very well. However, if 2 weeks later they're absolutely bereft because their hamsters died, people think that's strange. Well, that depends on their relationship with their hamster. If their hamster lived in their bedroom and they were supposed to feed and clean the hamster and clean the cage, and that hamster was their best friend in the whole world, and they told all their secrets to that hamster, and it knew everything about them, and it understood them, and now it was gone and they didn't have anybody to talk to. Potentially that's why people have different reactions to different losses, because it's about the relationship that they built. So don't be expecting that just because somebody has had a bereavement of somebody close to them in their family, that they may not react in a way you expect, because if they didn't have a close relationship that they built, the feelings aren't going to be there. This is why one of the reasons why I have so much trouble, and hopefully it will change after this situation, but I've been in kind of conversations with people where somebody very, very dear to them has died and they haven't been allowed time off work to go to that person's funeral. One of my really good friends, her best friend died a couple of years ago. They were they might as well just have been married, the pair of them. They kind of spent so much time together. They'd known each other for years. They finished each other's sentences. They went on holiday together. The only thing they didn't do was live with each other. And she was just devastated. He was taken ill very suddenly and died very, very suddenly in a matter of hours. And she wasn't allowed to take the afternoon off to go to his funeral because he wasn't a blood relative. And it's this kind of thing. So we have to kind of, even if we can't make a change, even if there are constraints within our organisation and there are constraints within what we can do, we can control what we say, and we can control the language we use, and we can control our element of compassion, and we can control what we say to others. And so this is about you just thinking about the language that you use. Now, it may be that you're thinking, oh, I'm sure I say all the right things, and I'm sure you do. I am not here to criticise the way you work or the way that you talk to people or the way you communicate with young people and adults. All I'm saying to you is that when I did this work a number of years ago, when I trained, I thought, yeah, do you know, I sat and I thought, crikey, I've said all those things as a mum. I've told my children just to, I was, when I used to work in the primary school, in the infant school when it was then, I have been the person who's gone to the pet shop at half term with a dead hamster and walked along the cages going, yeah, no, no, no. Oh, that one, that's about the right colour. Yeah, I'll buy that and I'll take it in and they'll never know it's died. And then they all come back in after half term and they go, oh, Scratchy's got like blonde highlights. And I'll say, oh, it's been ever so warm. He's been on his holidays. Well, you've been on holiday. Why didn't I just say he died in the holidays and we're going to have a little ceremony for him and we're all going to say what we think about Scratchy and we're going to tell him how much we loved him and how much he smelt horrid and how he squeaked and disturbed us when we were doing our work. We're going to share all those emotions with Scratchy and tell him what we think, and then that's the process that we need, rather than pretending that Scratchy has now got blonde highlights because he's been in my back garden for a week. So my final advice to you before I kind of move on to questions is, as I say, I learned this stuff and I questioned and I thought to myself, have I been the worst mother, the worst teacher, the worst aunt, the worst daughter in the world? Because for years I've been saying these things that I've now discovered aren't helpful. Absolutely not. Can't change what you did yesterday, but you can change what you do tomorrow. So this is just about thinking before we speak and maybe reframing some of our language. If you do want to know more and you are interested in doing the training to really understand it and give you a full toolkit that you can use all day, every day, then I know that Deborah's on top of that. There's a course starting next week and there'll be subsequent courses after that. So please don't worry. If you are in an organisation where you want to contact me directly to talk about your organisation, because maybe you're bigger than that and you don't want to just jump on somebody else's training, you want to commission some training for your staff team or whatever, please throw me an email. The training that I offer is a 4-session training. It's 2 hours a week for 4 weeks. So I would, if you're going to join something that we've set up, then obviously you'll join the dates that we've got. If you're your own organisation or you want to commission me to come and do something for you, then that will be up to me and you to discuss days and times. I work evenings because usually this work people are only available in the evening, but also I do daytimes because some organisations feel that their staff should be trained in work time rather than out of work time. So I'm open to a conversation, but that will give you very clear tools and a very clear action program to take for a young person. If you feel that they need more than just you to listen, that they need a plan of how to change the way they feel and to deal with whatever it is they've dealt with. And if you say to me, Catherine, will it work with? My answer is yes. I don't need to hear the end bit. It doesn't matter what it is, because everything that you will tell me will have an element of loss attached to it. So it could be a bereavement. It could be somebody who's had to move 100 miles away because the family's lost the job and everything's changed and, you know, their life's on its end. It could be about, it could be, you know, something that are involved with that's stopped because of this situation. Or it could be something involved with that's really not healthy for them. It doesn't matter. what it is, the process works. It's just about learning the skills, and I will give you those skills and I will help you to understand kind of how it works. So thank you for listening to my ramblings for the last 48 minutes. I know that you've got lots and lots of questions. Deborah, is there anything in particular you've spotted there, or anybody you want to unmute that wants to ask?
Yeah,
I can see.
I certainly just wanted to be able just to say thanks, Catherine, for that. And I know it's difficult when only 45 minutes in on Zoom, and as traditionally as youth workers, some of us are quite tactile and we like to be next to each other and talking this through. So we are in an unusual environment. But what I would say is it certainly resonates across the young people that we're working alongside, especially, you know, even for those that have had to go through the GCSEs and the A levels. You know, a lot of people are saying, oh, that's an easy cop out. But for a lot of young people, that is a loss, because they're never going to be able to go through that process of having kind of like a closure. And they may also always be labelled as, oh, you were the class of 2020 that got away with your GCSEs, you know. So there's that ongoing thing, how people perceive stuff. So it's been really interesting to hear that, Catherine. And I would certainly say we've got a few questions. I've got one from Katie. Katie just says, Catherine, what about over emotions? I find many of my young people express their emotions, but in a very strong way. Katie, do you want to speak about that, or do you want me to, let me just unmute you? Oh, hang on, bear with us, Katie, because I can't.
Oh, I can see. Is it Katie?
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute.
You can't. You have to do it yourself. It's the bottom.
Yeah. Oh, can you hear me now?
Hi, Katie.
Hi, both.
You go for it, Katie. You can ask the question.
Yeah, I think what I find, I mean, I think it's been a really brilliant talk, Catherine. I think
Thank
you've
you.
given us a lot of wise words there about not doing feelings for other people, but being alongside them. But what I struggle with is that I find that a lot of the young people I work with are very emotional. Really, I mean, and I struggle to find tools that will help them to get into a calmer place. To deal with what, so not to squash down the feelings, but just find a way of just
so I would, one of the analogies I use when I do this training is I talk to people about, for those of you over a certain age who remember the pressure cooker.
Yeah.
So my mum had a pressure cooker, and we have numerous holes in the kitchen ceiling, because if the lid wasn't on properly, that little valve would shoot in the air and embed itself in possibly polystyrene or similar tiling on the ceiling, because we push down and we push down and we push down, and we weren't built for that. And eventually at some point the lid comes off. Now the lid, which is what you're talking about here, can be shown in so many different ways, and it can happen for so many reasons. The lid sometimes is popped by the smallest, most, in our eyes, ridiculous and thing that didn't need to happen, like the breaking of a pencil. But if it's on top of all the other stuff and the breaking of the pencil is the final straw, then the lid will go. What we see when the lid goes can be a massive range, even for children and young people. So it can be over emotion, it can be anger, it can be the throwing of chairs, the hitting of people, screaming, shouting. It can go the other way, people being introvert, people hiding, people not speaking, eating, overeating. Now, I'll continue with the list that goes on a little bit older. Smoking, drinking, drugs, gaming all the time and not wanting to do anything else. And then I could just continue, because the course that I do teaches you to look for things to identify how emotions show themselves. And we automatically think about anger and over emotion, but we don't always think about some of the things that aren't as easy to spot. But in the process, it's then getting them, like you say, it's identifying that they're hurting and talking them to them in a way to bring them to a place where you can find out what's going on with them. I never say, how are you feeling? Because I can tell how they're feeling by the way they've just behaved. My question is usually, what's going on with you? Or what's happening with you?
One very quick question then. How do we instill hope?
I think that's down to language. I think that's down to communication. I think it's about not giving them anything that isn't true. So we're back to that, everything's going to be all right. I wouldn't say that at the moment, because I have no idea about everybody's individual lives and what they're dealing with. And to be fair, in the situation we're in at the moment, you could say to somebody, everything's going to be all right with the person today, and they could be gone tomorrow, because that's the nature of what we're living in at the moment. So I think it's about using language that we can't be tripped up with later. So again, being emotionally honest and only saying things that we know are true. So if that means saying to a young person, if they say to me, I don't know, is my dad going to die? The honest answer to that is, I don't know. I don't know if your dad's going to die. But what I do know is that the people who are looking after him are the best people for the job, and that they're doing everything they possibly can to make him well, so that he can be well enough to come home and see you. The other big issue at the moment, of course, is when people are unwell, is they can't be visited, they can't be seen, they can't be hugged. It's such a strange situation. So I would say it's in the language. Just remember to just always speak honestly, and don't, it's like any situation, the biggest issues I've dealt with over the years come from situations where families or professionals, and I say this very broadly because I have trained in my time teachers, psychologists, youth workers, social workers, every single job you can think of that support young people in all kinds of aspects, and parents. The biggest problems come from when the young people come back and say, they lied to me, you lied to me, you told me mum was going to be all right. You told me mum was coming back, to whoever that person is. And that's what creates more problems. So on a base level, I would say, be emotionally honest. Don't say anything that isn't true. And if they need to vent, let them vent. If you're the kind of person that needs to go and, do the Bridget Jones and put the movie on and sit and cry with a tub of ice cream and a box of tissues, doesn't really help by somebody going, no, I don't think you should do that. I think you should have some kale and we'll go for a walk, and then I'm sure you'll feel better. You do what's right for you, as long as it's not dangerous or too unhealthy, because it's short term. It's about getting you through a time, and it's the same for these young people. They need to do what they need to do. I can see here, big boys do cry. Absolutely, they do.
I think Dan was going to. Dan, did you want to ask a question? Did you have your? No, you're all right. I've got Jackie. I think this might have linked into what Catherine had just started on. You'd obviously. Do you want to ask the question? Or do you want to ask it, Jackie?
I think so. I think one of the biggest things that I'm missing at the moment is being able to offer presence to people. So you've already talked, Catherine, about how much a hug can mean when there simply aren't those words. And that's what I'm just feeling so limited in being able to do that, and just not really coming up with anything that matches that. So I'm not expecting you to come up with a miracle answer, but just what your thoughts are. And then secondly, what I'm observing is that children, in terms of a pecking order who can attend funerals, are right at the bottom of the list. And I recently dealt with a gentleman in his late 50s whose older sister, when he was 8 years old, had died. The only help that he got was from his dad, who said, I need you to be brave now, lad. This gentleman was attending his father's funeral, and that grief he'd never been able to express as a child came out at that funeral, and he recognised he'd carried it for all those years as bitterness and as anger. So my concern now is about these young people who are not allowed to go to their grandparents' funerals, who've been picking them up from school every day, looking after them after school, who've got amazing relationships, and they can't be at the funeral. So my worry is seeing that gentleman and how his grief was carried for all those years. How do we enable these children to grieve who desperately want to go to the funerals and are not allowed to do that?
I think I probably sound a bit like a broken record when I keep saying that the training program offers, that's part of it. It's about teaching children how to deal with loss, because we've been dealing with this for a while. We've got children who are maybe in separated families that are not allowed to go to funerals of people that they want to go to. We've got the issue of, should a child be at a funeral? That's something else that, an analogy I won't share because I'll just bore you all to bits if you decide to come on the training, and then all the stuff you'll have heard me say already. But I don't see any difference between a wedding and a funeral, and I'll share that with anybody who comes on the programme with me, because there isn't any difference between a wedding and a funeral. If you verbally, Jackie, describe a wedding or a funeral to a person, you will realise it's the same event. If you were imagining describing coming to a church service, say, to a young child for a wedding, and you tell them what's going to happen and what's going to be expected of them, and and then you get, and then I say to people, wedding or funeral, and they go, oh, because actually it's very similar. So it's about people feeling comfortable. I think it's difficult at the moment because you just cannot. I don't mind sharing this with you all. One of my best friends died. I think it was the second week of lockdown, not COVID related. She wasn't supposed to go anywhere. She became very ill and died very quickly. And we had her funeral, but only her daughters and her immediate family. That was the 10 people. And standing outside her house with 170 other people, seeing her off, not being able, people I've known for 40 years, not being able to hug them, not being able to, we talked, we said it all to each other. But again, it was a windy, horrible, wet day. We were shouting to each other, I'm so sorry you're having to be here. It's not my life. That's not a funeral to me. And what we have all said is that when this is over, we will do it again. And we will do it properly as we would have done it at the time. And I think this is where potentially memorial services and things like that will come into their own, which will give people a chance to say what they need to say. The problem is, as I said right at the beginning, about preparing for rather than dealing with. So being reactive rather than proactive. I would rather have seen you all 6 months ago than see you all now, because now you're trying to deal with it while you've got it. If you had the skills before, and that's what this is about, teaching children how to prepare for losing somebody, even if it's only minutes or hours before that person goes, is still better than trying to deal with it afterwards. And if we deal with it afterwards, it's how to, but it is about communication. Think about, I know you've probably all got other places to go, but think about the process for those of you who've been to a funeral for a wake, or whatever you want to call it. That time afterwards, everybody sits around telling stories about that person, the good things, the bad things, the irritating things. And then it's usually fueled with a couple of drinks, and then people tell a few more stories and a few more home truths and things that they wish they'd said to them and didn't say to them. And it's all that stuff. This is what this is about. All this emotion and all this stress and anxiety and whatever you want to call it is all coming from undelivered communications. And that can happen when there's any kind of loss and we don't have an outlet for it. So the training teaches you what to do, follow a process to identify it, take them through the process, find a way of identifying what the problem is, and then a tool to deliver all those undelivered communications and come out the other end. And that toolkit can be used time and time and time again for the same child, for 100 children, for 1,000 children and young people. I keep saying children, I apologise. The course was written originally for children and young people, for parents who were dealing with the loss of a child and supporting a sibling. And then it was decided, well, teachers, youth workers, everybody else in the world that supports children needs the same skill set. And actually, although our program my program is called Helping Others Deal with Loss. I've put on your flyer helping young people deal with loss, but actually I call it Helping Others Deal with Loss, because the skill set is so transferable. Because all this stuff you've learned today and the stuff that you've listened to, you won't just use with children and young people. You'll say things differently to your friends. When I learned about this, I discovered it's the only thing in all the years, and if there's any teachers or teaching assistants on this webinar right now, you will get it, and I'm sure the rest of you will when I say this. I have been sent on so many trainings and inset days and conferences, and I've sat and listened to people that I've really not got a lot from, or I've been then, when I was a nursery nurse, locked in a cupboard for a week to make resources in order to be able to use the tools I've just learnt. And so many of these trainings and courses aren't practical. They talk about Maslow, and they talk about well-being, and they talk about resilience, and they talk about all these things, but they don't actually give you the practical tools to use them from day one and give you a toolkit to use for the rest of your life. And you will use that toolkit with children, with young people, with young adults, with adults. It will change you as a person because it will change the way that you speak and you frame your language. Sorry, I always sound a bit evangelical when I get there, because I know how much difference it makes, and I know that you all want to make a difference, and that's what this is all about. You're on this today because you want to learn how to make a difference, and I can't tell you that, and I can't teach you that in 45 minutes, but I can teach you it in about 10 hours.
We have come to an end, but I do have to say that there are some really nice comments, and I'll just end with what Steve's put down, saying that he works in a special needs school, and they have a light a candle in assembly each time a student dies, which is a regular event. And at his youth club, they've done something similar, and we let the young person who's grieving talk about their relation who died, and this was helpful to everyone. It's a simple ceremony in essence. And I think that that's something that's not nice because somebody's died, but that just shows how people can come together and talk about their grief.
No, it is. It's really lovely. Thank you for that, Steve. I did some training with a local special needs school last year, and one of the things that they realised when they'd done this training was that they actually needed to revisit their staff policy on bereavement, because they were doing it all for their children, but they weren't. You have to, I think, in organisations, once you learn these tools, it needs to become a whole organisation ethos. It's no good if one person is saying, yes, please tell me how you feel, and let's talk about this person, and somebody else is going, what's the matter with you, why are you crying? And those of you certainly, you know, in large organisations will know those people, and I don't mind saying this, I've taught for 30 years, and there are people I know and that I still know that shouldn't be teachers because they're not the right kind of people. And you will always have those people, but the idea is that those who want to help should be able to help, but sometimes they don't have the tools, they don't have the skill set, or they don't understand what to say and what not to say. But it is massively important, like you've said, to give them the opportunity, because it is about communication. How many of us have got somebody who's not in our life anymore that we'd like to be able to share something with if we could? If I could wave a magic wand and put somebody back in the room for 10 minutes, good or bad, because this is not just all about, we need to remember, this is not all about positive, lovely, loving relationships. This is about difficult relationships, or people that have not been very nice to us. But there's always stuff to be said. And as you said before, Jackie, people carry that around. I had a lady that I worked with a few years ago who told me that she felt like she'd been carrying a backpack around for 20 years, and it had made every decision for her job, her personal life, where she lived, who she was friends with, and it was all pivoting on one thing that had happened to her when she was 18. And because she'd never dealt with that, unfortunately, and this is what we're talking about, so through this training, I give you the skill set to give young people the skill set to not be that person, to have a toolkit themselves to take them through life, and to not be that person who comes to somebody like me 20 years later and says, I've held on to this for 20 years. But if I say, I know we're finished. Thank you so much for listening to me waffling on. If you want to connect with me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit at my laptop for another 25 minutes or so. Thank you, Jeanette. I can see your clapping hands. Thank you so much. If anybody wants to connect with me now, send me an email. I'll get through as many as I can right now. I've got somebody booked in with me at I've got a session booked at 3:30 till 4:30, but I'll then check back on my emails. If you want to connect with me, you want my phone number because a conversation is easier than a lengthy email, then I'm happy to share. If I put, I'm just going to check I'm typing it right. I've put my mobile number in the chat. It's not. I sent it to Sahara. I apologise. It's supposed to send it to everyone. There's everyone.
Great.
Apologies, Sahara. I think I've just sent it to you only. I apologise. I wasn't picking on you wherever you are on the call. But please do connect with me if I can help in any way. And if it's not today, that's fine. If it's over the next weeks or months or years, I'm never offended if somebody says this is not the right time for us now, and then comes back and said, actually, we can use your help. What I do know is that many organisations, when they're inspected by the various bodies, have to show some form of formal training or some kind of process to tick the box for well-being. It was on the cards before this situation. It will definitely be on the cards afterwards, because we are going to be scrutinised and looked at and asked. Nobody's really going to give us the tools for it. They're just going to ask us how we're achieving it. And this also goes for you as people. As I said before, if anybody wants to connect, or if you know somebody that is struggling, then please put them in touch with me. Normally we can see people in person. At the moment we can't. But I work electronically, so I can meet up with anybody no matter where they are in the country. But thank you all so much. And if I can support your organisations in any way, please connect with me.
Hi, Catherine. As well to everybody. I think it's probably worth. I'm from an education background.
Hi, Emily.
And I work in a local authority as the RSHE advisory lead in public health and across and education and across everybody. And I work in a school improvement service background. My role is quite rare. Really would actively encourage you to have a look at the RSHE statutory guidance. It's due to come in obviously in September. There's been a bit of a delay now because of obviously everything that's happened. There's huge amounts of these themes, topics, conversation all the way through that guidance. So schools are having the same sorts of conversations that you're having with from a youth service perspective, irrespective of Corona kicking in, but obviously now even more so than ever before. So there is a lot more of an open door now, probably between schools and youth services and other teams and organisations that exist. So please do work with one another. Please do reach out to the groups and schools, etc., that you work with, because you'll find that there may be a more open dialogue going on between everybody as a result of this.
Emily,
a lot of content is huge.
Thank you, Emily. If you've got, would you be able to send me that guidance?
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, Catherine.
Great. I mean, the thing I would say, when I did the work that I did in 2013, and my direction changed, and I continued teaching for another 2 years until this just got too big and I didn't have time to do both. I believed that when I finished my training, everybody I knew in schools, I would tell them about this and they'll go, yeah, that's great, we need it, this is really good. And the response I usually got was, this is not really a focus for us now. We're more about, achievement and attainment. But actually, for me, this has always been the underlying element. If you've got a young person who isn't happy, you're never going to get them to achieve or attain. And I agree with you that I think schools now, instead of always saying to me, oh, we don't have the budget for this, and I have to tell you, my training is cheaper than even half a day at a conference for an individual, that this is always the issue, unfortunately. It is about money, but I work with organisations. I run a community interest company, and I use that money to fund those who do not have any money to get help for themselves, and maybe on an 8-month waiting list. So that's why I charge. But it is difficult sometimes still to get organisations to part with sums of money. And I say, look at this training a bit like you would look at a first aid course. Everybody doesn't need to do it, but you do need a key number of people in an organisation that are your go-tos to support your other key staff and your young people.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Emily. I can see you've put the link there as well.
Okay, guys, so thank you very much again for being here. Please look on our website for any updated information. And I just want to say thank you and stay safe, everyone, and have a peaceful weekend.
Has everybody got the web link for the course that's going to be starting, or do we think that might be full?
I think that's going to be full now, but there will be other stuff.
So maybe connect with me or
pending.
connect with. Great. So maybe connect with me or with Deborah if anybody's interested and can't get on that course that's starting next week. thank you all very much.
Thank you, everybody.
A virtual hug to everybody, because I am a hugger, so I'm sorry, I'm sending you one anyway. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Do you want to stop, Catherine? Do you want to stop on?
Yeah.
Are you all right for a few
Yeah,
minutes?
I'm all right for a minute.
Okay.
Jackie, please contact me if I can help you in any way.
Yes, I really would. I'm so interested in going on the course. I don't know whether there's places available, but I will message you and just see how quickly I can do that.
They're going to be running all through the summer. I'm going to run as many as we need. I'll do one day. I'll do a Monday course, I'll do a Monday group, a Tuesday group, a Wednesday group, a Thursday group if I need to get everybody sorted. I've worked with a lot of pastoral assistants and clergy, and they've always found it really useful because it's very transferable. Although it says children and young people, it's actually, you can use it with every single person.
Yeah. Catherine, I've got the potential of having an interview with the BBC very, very soon. And to do with grieving, we did an interview a couple of weeks ago that focused on well, it was going to go under the heading of funerals, but what they realised during that interview process was that actually funerals and grieving are two very, very different things. So there should be a programme coming out very shortly, just basically on funerals, and one coming out grieving. So I think I'd like to talk to you about that, because you only get very, very short time, and I would be interested in what's the most important thing that I could say about that.
So my email and my phone number are in the chat.
Okay.
If you've got my email, throw me an email and we'll connect sometime on Zoom and we'll have a chat, and I'll help you in any way I can. And obviously, if you're interested in the 4 session as well, just please let me know.
I will do. Yeah.
All right.
I've loved that. That's been absolutely amazing. Thank you.
Well, and please,
obviously,
if there's others in the same field that you think would be interested, just share it. Happy to share it with anybody.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely to talk to you.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care, Jackie.
Thank you.